So I finally stepped outside the MAGA echo chamber. I stopped listening to what Trump said and looked around with my own eyes. And I realized he had been lying about pretty much everything.
If I asked you how many prominent Democrats spoke enthusiastically about Donald Trump at the Republican convention, the answer would be 0, right? And while Trump attracted celebrecrats like Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock, the Democrats are featuring at least 3 Republicans of note who are brave enough to break with the party and share their support for Harris and their disdain for the aberration that is Donald Trump. Hang in there, because in just a minute I'll share the full clip of what you just saw. But first, let's tee up the subjects of this recent New York Times article with the headline, "Some Republicans Will Take Center Stage at the Democratic Convention." First up is Anna Navarro, a Republican co-host of The View, who has aggressively criticized Trump for years. Watch as she explains her journey and motivation for serving as DNC host.
One thing you were for a long time is a Republican. I mean, I met you. You were working for Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney and John McCain. Like, you're running the show here tonight at the convention. What does that say?
Look, yesterday when Joe Biden was speaking and he had that moment, I love my job, but I love my country more. And I think people need to heed those words. We need to love our country more. So for me, when Donald Trump became the nominee, when Donald Trump, it was clear he was going to win, that was it for me. I didn't need to see him for 4 years. I saw him come down an escalator and I knew exactly who he was. I remembered Maya Angelou's words. When they show you who they are, believe them the first time. Yeah. And I did.
In just a few seconds, I'll play the video I teased at the top of someone who was not only on the right, but on the far right as a MAGA Republican. But first, I want you to meet my favorite Republican, former Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger. I say favorite because he's been one of the most vocal, most consistent Republican opponents of Trump. And here he is in a recent interview sharing a repelling moment he had with Trump that in part drives his motivations for supporting Harris.
He can't help himself. I mean, look, I saw this when I would meet with him in the Oval Office. Just like, I don't even know how to put it to words, but there's this kind of guttural sense about him. He kind of feels, in not an empathetic way, but he feels like in a personal way, people's traits. So here's a quick example is he was talking to us about it. We were trying to get him to stay in Afghanistan and stay in Syria. It was me and some of the Hawks. And he just goes, he was talking about and he actually talked about this recently, like the injured people in Afghanistan, the injured soldiers. But he's like, they're like missing arms and disfigured faces. But the way he's describing it, you can sense that he's feeling some almost disgust for the disfigurement. Don is the kind of guy, Donald, not Donnie, is the kind of guy that I frankly don't want to be in a room with because he's gross. So for me, it's like, where do I belong? Certainly the current GOP, I'm going to maintain the label Republican because I refuse to let them win. But the party is not a conservative party today. It's a party of fascism, and I don't belong there.
And now for the bombshell video that dropped last night at the convention featuring Rich Logis. The New York Times reports that Logis volunteered for Mr. Trump's 2016 campaign, but he said he ultimately broke with Mr. Trump over his managing of the COVID-19 pandemic, the January 6th attack, and the Republicans' opposition to gun control.
My name is Rich Logis. I live in Florida, and until 2 years ago, I was a full-fledged member of MAGA. I believed Trump. I was a MAGA pundit. I had my own podcast. I was in a state of panic, terrified that Democrats were destroying our country. When the pandemic hit, we needed leadership, but we were given almost nothing. It was a major betrayal to the country. So I finally stepped outside the MAGA echo chamber. I stopped listening to what Trump said and looked around with my own eyes. And I realized he had been lying about pretty much everything. Lying is Trump's toxic superpower. He's ripped apart families, communities, our whole country. So this is my message to all the Republicans and independents who are watching. People like me who voted for and believed in Trump. I made a grave mistake, but it's never too late to change your mind. You don't need to agree with everything you hear tonight to do what is right. We need to be able to trust our leaders. That's why I'm all in for Kamala Harris.
And I think that very unique trajectory explains how he ended up on the DNC big screen, and I appreciate that he shared his story. In a time of deep polarization, I think this showcase of Republican defectors is a strategic move by the Harris campaign to show that the Democratic Party is a unifying force, and it shows well. Rather than demonizing the opposition as just one thing, they can highlight an inclusive approach that contrasts with the divisiveness and the extremism that has taken hold of the Republican Party under Trump's influence. The ultimate goal is to show swing voters that the Democratic Party, led by Harris, is in the best position to usher in a new era of leadership.
I broke with Donald Trump. I broke with the Republican Party, the Trump Party, way back then, and haven't looked back.
It just blows me away that others didn't do the right thing, because it's like not that hard. This guy's crazy. So it's like, I mean, come on.
And I'm loving seeing this optimism, this hope, this joy, laughter, things you don't see in a Republican convention.